Good morning. I would like to welcome you to the regular public workshop meeting of the Henry County Board of Commissioners for 9 a.m. Monday, October 3rd, 2011. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask for an acceptance of the agenda.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion by Mr. Stamey, second by Mr. Holder. All in favor. Motion carries 3-0. Before I call the first item, I do want to mention that we have two commissioners who are absent today. And just to let you know that the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia has a training session going on in Atlanta today. And because it is close to home and within driving distance, our two commissioners felt that it was in the best interest of their constituents and their representation of the county to take advantage of some of those training classes that ACCG is offering. And so Mr. Holmes and Mr. Auletta are there this morning, and because this is a work session without a lot going on, they felt comfortable in missing these meetings, and we certainly support their desire to learn more on how they can best serve in county government. With that being said, the first item on the agenda this morning is Planning and Zoning Services Division. We have a discussion on outdoor lighting regulations. Our presenter is Michael Harris, Planning and Zoning Services Division Director, Exhibit Number 1. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, board members. A few months back, we received a request from a citizen concerning a particular light adjacent to a subdivision, and they felt it was causing a nuisance. It was looked at by myself, members of the Building Department, Planning and Zoning Department, as well as Code Enforcement. They were asking, they felt that it constituted a nuisance to them. However, our current code does not recognize light pollution, as it were, as a nuisance item. They sent a letter of request in asking if the county could look into perhaps amending our code to include light pollution as either a nuisance or develop some types of standards. We've typically, in the past, have handled issues regarding commercial lighting as a condition on zoning requests, downcast lighting, moderate brightness, things of that nature. However, we have never developed any set regulations to govern light pollution. Wanted to bring the issue back to the board. We looked into other jurisdictions, most notably Cherokee County locally has. They've gone through and they've done some, they've created some regulations to govern light pollution. In conversations with, amongst us as staff and speaking with the county attorney, we felt probably the most appropriate location for this is not in the nuisance section, but rather in the development standard, site development standard section. And if it's the board's desire to create language and create an ordinance, we felt it would probably be most appropriate to include it in the site development standards. So any commercial development would have to adhere by a set of development regulations to kind of really regulate, so they know exactly what they'd be required to meet to prevent any kind of light pollution on adjacent properties. So right now, I'm just asking the board if you like, if it's the board's desire for staff to move forward with crafting an ordinance to address this concern.
Ms. Wiley, you had referenced in your remarks some concerns about the ordinance. Can you speak to that?
When I spoke with Mr. Harris concerning the issues that precipitated this particular request, I learned that the lighting at issue was not on the county right-of-way. It was not permitted by the county, and essentially the dispute was a purely private dispute between the owner of the lighting fixture in the property that was causing the property owner to be offended, and the county had no dog in the fight, for lack of a better term. And so I did not feel it was appropriate to try to criminalize purely private activity that really, if there was a problem with the lighting, the property owner could have gone to civil court to address that remedy, because there are civil nuisance laws to address those type matters, and the county should not be involved in attempting to criminalize that behavior. Otherwise, lawful behavior that did not violate any existing regulation or ordinance that we have. And so those were my concerns I expressed in your notebooks, and I spoke to Mr. Harris about that. The proposal now, I guess, or the recommendation as to whether or not y'all should go forward with approving a standards for the development standards to govern lighting, I think it's within the board's purview, or it can be handled on a case-by-case basis the way it's been handled in the past. I don't know how that will affect it won't affect the present situation that caused this particular complaint to occur. But if that's what the board is leaning towards, then I don't see anything wrong with making it a regulatory standard for development purposes, but not criminalizing that.
So when you say criminalize, that would put that under the same type of nuisance ordinance that the noise ordinance currently falls under?
Yes, nuisance cases in the criminal context are difficult in any event. Under our ordinance, we have noise, we have there's smell, there are different types of nuisances that our current ordinance prohibits, and they're very difficult to prosecute in the first instance. I think this new light pollution proposal would make that even more difficult to regulate on a criminal basis. And it's important to note that when we go to court on our county ordinance violations, the magistrate court only has two options. It can either issue a fine if it finds someone guilty or put them in jail. It can't order the lighting to be changed or moved. It does not have those type of powers. Those are powers that are more appropriate and more delegated to the Superior Court to do, which will handle that in a civil context, not a criminal context.
Does any board member have a question? Mr. Bowman?
I don't have a question. I agree with LaTanya in that lighting pollution, is that what you were calling it?
That's a term that's been used in some of the jurisdictions, to call it light pollution.
Okay. I mean, I just, I envision, actually, I have a piece of property down in Butts County on Jackson Lake, and my next door neighbor has a security light. And the security light lights up part of my backyard. I mean, I think we're getting regulation. I think we're getting like regulation crazy. And recently I've ran across some issues where I feel like we're way overboard with some of our regulations. And I don't think that's, I'm going to have a problem with that. I'm going to have a problem with creating an ordinance. I mean, if you do it during the development stage and you say, okay, you're going to, but what happens when this light, we approve this particular light during the development stage, and John Doe builds his house, and all of a sudden he says, well, that light's light pollution. That light's interfering with my ability to go to sleep. Well, put some curtains up. I mean, I have an issue with that. I really do. I mean, we're ordinance crazy already. I don't think we need to I don't think we need to do anything else with it. I mean, that's my comment. It's really not a question. It's a comment. And I agree with our county attorney. I mean, my gosh, if that was to happen, I see lights all over, security lights that are shining. And I have to have another piece of property where there's one shining across into somebody's yard. Does that mean they're going to come over and I got to cut my light off? I don't think so. I have an issue with that. That's all. Thank you for allowing me to vent on that particular issue.
You're welcome.
But I do have an issue with it. I don't think we need to get into that. That's a civil issue if you're going to do something.
And Chairman, if I may, and the other jurisdictions that we looked at, typically what they were measuring was the intensity of the lighting at a particular horizontal distance away, measured in foot candles. So there's a small device they can use to go out and say, if you're 10 feet away, it should be this. If you're 20 feet away, it should be this. And that's pretty much the standard that we've seen in some of the other jurisdictions. So that's kind of how that's what they're looking at. The intensity based on your distance from the particular light.
Thank you.
Mr. Holder?
A couple of questions, Michael.
Yes, sir.
Had Cherokee County's or Sarasota, Florida's ordinance been in place at the time the complaint was raised from this particular individual that has obviously prompted this study, would it have addressed the person's concern?
Perhaps. Again, I don't know. I guess it would have given us a mechanism to go out and make a measurement in this case. But again, likely we would have looked to address it during the development stage, as was stated. Once I think in this case, when the clubhouse would have been built. Bert and I spoke about this a little bit about during the development stage requiring a lighting plan that in essence would show the propagation of the light within the property. So if we had something like that in place and we can go out and prove that, your plan called for this and now you're exceeding that by this amount, then I think we would have had a case. But again, we didn't have anything like that in place.
Well, I noticed, and I think you're exactly right, the way to address it is to do it at the development stage so that it's addressed. But I noticed also in Cherokee counties and Sarasota, Florida, the government is exempt by street lighting and various other things. So in this particular case where the complaint was filed, was the light coming from a right-of-way or was it from an individual's or business's light?
In this particular case, it was not on county right-of-way. It was at a clubhouse located on private subdivision property. In the clubhouse, the homeowner association came in and erected a light on the clubhouse property. And it was spilling over across the street onto an adjacent residence.
Because, for many, many years now, in all the lighting plans, and I know Bert's here and Sherry, all lighting plans have basically been downcast and to hold the lighting on the property, basically. Yes, you're going to get some. Okay, that basically answers my question. But you think that if those ordinances had been in place and during the development process, the ordinance was enforced, that this might have addressed this person's issue?
I think it could have.
Could have.
It could have, certainly. And again, in this case, the light that was installed was not a downcast light. The light that was installed was the exact same type of light that is used on our street right-of-ways. So again, that in itself could have had a lot of bearing on affecting adjacent property.
Mr. Stain, did you have anything?
No, Mike, I'm just wondering, I agree with Reed's comments earlier about, regulations on the street lights and even lighting, but there's nothing we can do today that would resolve that complaint of this individual. Even if we were to adopt something today, they would be covered, grandfathered in anyway.
That's right, as the county attorney has mentioned. That's
Yeah,
right.
so I don't think I'm interested.
And that's it. I guess our option today would be either we continue to address it on a case-by-case basis with our zoning conditions, or we looked at establishing kind of regulations. And, since we had the request from the citizen come in, wanted to bring it before the board as a discussion item.
Okay.
All right, what is the board's pleasure? Would you like to see staff look at creating a new outdoor lighting ordinance or modifying the one that's in place, or just leave it as it stands? They're looking for direction on that.
Leave it as it stands, handle it on a case-by-case basis with the development. When the development's going in, then people have the lights are in most of the time before, or at least the poles. People know where they're going to be before they start or build a house. I know in phases it'll be that way, but, they'll know, hey, there's going to be a light there.
I have to agree with that.
Mr. Holder, you in agreement with that?
I don't have to agree or disagree. And I probably would disagree to the point that it's not good to create an ordinance based on one complaint. We've had that before in many areas of the county, not with noise. It could have been noise. In fact, the one I'm referring to was a noise. Parking and different things. And you remember, some of us remember that. And all of that was built around one complaint. And that's usually not good because it gets us in trouble. But I would still like to see us have the best ordinance in place that we could. Anytime we impose an ordinance, we're taking somebody's rights away also. That's just a given. But in reading through these ordinances, I think that there are some that we may be missing some things on that could prevent something in the future from the board having to do things on a case-by-case. But, I would say proceed and try to come up with the best ordinance we can, tailored and blended from some of these model ordinances that you've already picked up. But that's just my opinion. 2 to 1, like I said. It doesn't- I can count. I'm not too smart, but I can count to 3.
I was trying to think of a compromise in the midst of this.
If you read under the ordinance here, on the approval of the lighting plans, number 2, lighting plans shall be submitted with the final plat, and you can make changes upon accepting the final plat of the approval of the project anyway, on the commercial side. And is our complaint mainly coming from commercial to residential or from residential to residential?
Well, in this one case, it was a residential development, and it was the clubhouse, got somewhat of a commercial use within a residential development. So typically, the calls that we do receive, and they're relatively few between Sherry and Bert, they are commercial lights spilling over into some of the residential areas. And again, those are few and far between, but again, the majority of that is really addressed during the, using the downcast lighting, moderate brightness, those kind of conditions.
If I may, Madam Chair, and I think what you just said is right. Downcast, medium,
Brightness,
whatever, brightness, medium brightness, that's very subjective. I mean, you don't know.
Right.
That could be anything. Where these other ordinances tell you what the count of power has to be at 20 feet, 50 feet, so forth and so on. So that's the point I'm making. That way, even though you say, yeah, it's got to be downcast lighting, well, if he puts a 500-watt bulb in, or 500 whatever, and it should be 100,
Right.
then, obviously, the light's going to be more intense. So that's what I'm saying in the ordinance. It defines what the actual brightness can be.
Yeah, and again, if it's the board's desire, we can look at some of the other jurisdictions and assign a number to, for commercial, just, for commercial, and we can mandate that it is downcast lighting, moderate brightness, not to exceed, X number of foot candles. Again, that's an option.
In this case, Michael, this was an EMC poll that went up,
Yeah, EMC or Georgia Power, Paul, Bert, one of the two.
Don't say it.
and we didn't permit those,
That's
correct?
correct, we did not.
So how will any ordinance impact that structure that we don't permit?
And that was another part of the challenge. If it's the initial development during the original development phase, in this case, when the clubhouse would have been built, we could have, those regulations would be applied. Bert and I discussed that this morning. In those cases, we'd have to figure out if we need to get with the Georgia Power and EMCs to make them aware of what our requirements are, so they know anything that gets installed within Henry County has to meet a certain threshold. And obviously, we'd kind of vet that through to other jurisdictions to see how they've handled it as well.
When you do when you do your case-by-case evaluation for the lighting plan, you base it on the ordinance and what the ordinance calls for, right?
Correct.
So you can't use candlefoot as part of your evaluation because it doesn't specifically state that in
That's
the
correct.
ordinance.
That's correct.
So if you had the ability to do that, and then you could, of course, condition that as they come through with their lighting plan.
That's correct. And there are some ordinances that do, in fact, I was looking at the adult entertainment ordinance recently, and there's a provision in there, it talks about lighting, and it does have a measurement of foot candles within there, so it's not something that we haven't done before as a county in some of our regulations. So it has been utilized in other places.
Well, I would like to see you come back with maybe some additional language to go in the ordinance that would sort of give you more flexibility when a lighting plan comes through for a commercial establishment.
Okay.
And you can come back before the full board as just food for thought when the other two commissioners are here, but at least it'll give them an opportunity to weigh in on this topic of conversation as well.
That'd be fine. We can draft something up and bring it back as a discussion item if that's the board's desire.
Please do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to technology services, we are going to receive a biannual update of technology services strategic plan, projects, and accomplishments. Our presenter is Clark Rayner, Director of Technology Services, Exhibit Number 2. Good morning.
Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you today just to sort of give you a little bit of a roadmap of what we have planned for the next several years, and it's something, this is the first time we've done this, So it's something we'd like to try to do at least on a biannual basis, just to sort of make sure that we're in line with your leadership, and to make sure that that everybody kind of understands where we're going. I'd just like to start out by reading our mission statement. This is from the Technology Services Department. But it's to promote, facilitate, and deliver operational efficiency through the selective use of technology by providing business process planning and implementation, business continuity, data integrity, security, and efficient service to fulfill the organizational vision and goals set forth by you, the Henry County Board of Commissioners, the courts, and related constitutional offices. It is our goal to promote efficiency. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're here to streamline business, to make things more efficient. I'd like to start off with just a little bit of background, and I'm going back to 1999 because that's as far as I go back with Henry County. But back in 1999, 12 years ago, Henry County's population was about 90,000. There were about 900 full-time employees working for the county, with 3 AS400 computers, similar to a mainframe, and 3 Windows, that's Microsoft Windows-based servers. The internet access throughout the county was limited to 15 dial-up internet accounts from a local startup company called iNetNow. There was no county website. There was no centralized email for employees. There were 30 gigabytes worth of data. I bought an iPad about 2 weeks ago, and it's got more storage capacity than the entire county had back then. And business processes generally throughout the county, the courts, and all the departments in the county were mostly paper-based, but they were labor-intensive and oftentimes duplicating effort from one another. We'll fast forward to 2011 to where we are today. And the first 2 things to mention is the population today we believe exceeds 204,000, well over 100% increase in the past 12 years. However, our full-time employees have only increased to 1,300. Had the number of full-time employees kept up with the same rate of growth as the population of the county, we would have somewhere around 1,900 employees. Now, we won't say that technology helped to keep those numbers down as much as they did, but I think it certainly contributed to that. Today we have 7 AS400s and about 75 Microsoft Windows-based servers. We have a centralized, managed internet, a world-class website thanks to our communications department, with occasional help from the Technology Services Department, which is fully integrated and gives citizens and employees alike access to real-time live data, a real interactive experience there on the web. We have a centrally managed email system, and we also have about 60 terabytes, or that's about 60,000 gigabytes, so from 30 to 60,000 in 12 years. And that rate, as we watch today, is growing, and it grows at an exponential level. It should typically double about once every 3 years. If it does that every 3 years, we're just using a lot more of it. We're seeing a lot more video, a lot more data-intensive applications, and employees and the public alike are using information much more readily now than they ever have before. We don't think that that's going to slow down any. Today, most of the business processes throughout the county are electronic, but there's still a great deal of work to be done in terms of integration between departments and working on actually the way that business processes are handled, especially when we're talking about multiple departments. The development life cycle group, as we call them, which is everything from planning and zoning to the building permits and development to business license, which includes GIS and tax assessment and tax commission. that entire life cycle, you're dealing with about 8 different departments where information has to flow from, it starts at one place and ends up flowing sometimes back and forth in between departments as things are worked out. Sometimes they're kicked back down and they start over again. But working through those issues with the help of some technology, I think will help create a lot more of an efficient environment. It's easier for citizens to understand and just makes doing business here a lot easier as well. A little bit about the AS400 infrastructure, and I put this up here because unless you're in the IT field and you work on these things, or maybe you have the screen in front of you where you've done some work in place of business or whatnot, it's not something that's typical knowledge that people would have. Today we have 7 AS400s. We have 3 that are active and 3 that are passive. One handles all of the administration. We call it the back office software, but things like purchasing and finance and payroll. We also have building permits and a number of other applications that are really the back office. Not the most exciting software or most exciting thing in the world, but absolutely essential to conducting business. And we had the 3 passive are at a disaster recovery site, which is over at the Annex building. If something happens to this building or to these systems here, those automatically switch on and become an active system. And we have one that's set up for development. We have the administration. We have one that's used for the 911 computer-aided dispatch, and then one that is for the police department, their record management system. As we move forward, we'll see why that's important. These things cost about $500,000 a year to maintain and operate, which we think is a significant number and certainly something that we're working to address. And you'll see that here in just a moment. The applications that are being used on those AS400s are being phased out by their vendor. Now, their vendor hasn't publicly come out and said that, but by various means we found out that they've reduced their staff by about half that's supported this. The type of people that have the knowledge base to work on these things has been reduced. There's just it's more expensive as the labor pool gets smaller with that skill set, and the technology has changed a lot in 12 years. Windows servers, Microsoft World has gotten much more stable and much more reliable than it was 12 years ago. Something like a 911 system on a Windows server 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I just wouldn't have felt comfortable at all about it. But that's not true today. And this is what's happened to the Windows world and where we're going. In 2014, we have about 75 of these Windows servers today. By 2014, we expect that number to be at least 125. And the way that we do this is not physically meaning that we're going to have 125 boxes, because that world has changed. We can put 125 servers using a technique called virtualization. It means that one physical box can actually house anywhere between 30 and 50 individual servers. We can create a new server in less than 5 minutes using this technique. And in doing so, it is much more easy to manage, much more affordable to manage, and basically the entire infrastructure handling the servers can be handled for the entire county using 2 people, 1 person plus another guy for when the one that normally handles it's either sick or on vacation. And generally, the support skill set that is required in this new environment that we're planning to go to, it's much more abundant. Just about every kid coming out of school today has some experience in this realm. It's what they're used to. The kids that are graduating from high school today grew up with these things in their hands since literally they were toddlers, and they understand it, and therefore the cost of that labor is significantly less than what the AS400s are today. And in general, the last line there you see is that the costs are about half of what the AS400s are to maintain. we're going to talk a little bit about the new software that we're planning to go to. And just want to give some definitions because you'll hear this come up again in future meetings and whatnot. But ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. And basically you can see there finance, payroll, HR, building development code, development life cycle, and citizen services are all of these back office applications. ERP is what it's called. We conducted an efficiency study. This was going back about 8 months ago now. But basically, we looked at 5 departments. We had an outside firm come in to assist us with this. But we looked at 5 different departments where they literally came in, sat down, and went through all of, or not all of, but the high-level business processes that go on in those departments. How do you do this specific thing? What happens to this piece of paper after I fill out this form? And they looked at exactly what was happening. You know, what happened to that form when it went to the next person and the next person and the next person. And basically, at the end of the day, what we found was that just in those 5 departments alone, they identified over $500,000 a year in redundant efforts or work that was being done that just had no purpose at all. You know, we're actually, basically wasting $500,000 a year. And some of it is because of the software we're currently using is limited to what it can do and the way you have to do things. The current software requires that you dig down into lots and lots of screens to get to a small task, and then you have to dig your way back out of it. And so this is some of the inefficiencies that we're hoping to address with the new system. We've already begun this. You approved a server, new servers from Cisco just about a month ago. We have 3 sites. We have the administration building, we have 911, and then we have our disaster recovery center, which is at the annex. All of the servers, anything that's currently running on an AS400 in terms of software, we're planning to move over to this new platform. The next thing that you'll have, which we have an RFP out right now, is for storage. And this is all those gigabytes and terabytes and things like that. That's where this lives. But we're going to start out with about 100 terabytes here, 100 terabytes at the DR site, and another 5 terabytes at 911. 911 needs to be self-contained and self-sufficient, even though it will be backed up both here and at the DR site. But in case all the wires are clipped in between here and there, it needs to operate. Network upgrades, those are going on as well, and that's to increase the increased bandwidth requirements. We have our phone system is now 5 years old. The thing that was approved about a month ago will also upgrade the phone system and bring it up to date. The DR site, as I said, was it's over at the annex. And one thing that we're hoping to include in the new system and the new disaster recovery software is an option for e-discovery. And this is extremely important to our legal staff for conducting public information requests. Today, when we get a public information request, it's literally a manual process to where we have to go from computers to phones to all the different places where data is stored today, whether it's on a server or it's in multiple places, and we have to spend a lot of time. We actually spend a lot of time determining how much time that it will take us to conduct a public information request. And e-discovery is basically, think of it kind of like Google for all the information that's housed all over the county. Being able to go to one place and be able to search all the information throughout the county and get a relevant result that satisfies the legal requirements of not only public information requests, but also of discovery when that has to go on in legal cases and whatnot. And we think that's extremely important and valuable. This is just a graphical representation of the 3 sites. Again, a little bit more about ERP. These are the targeted areas that we're hoping to address, but the entire finance system, the auditing, grants management, purchasing, inventory, asset management, human resources. And it's interesting today, we don't have a human resources software. Our human resources are handled completely by paper or through the payroll system. which is really a finance function. There is no system in place today that manages human resources from a human resources perspective, handling all of the varieties of issues that can happen with managing people. It's really all a paper-based system, terribly inefficient, and very difficult to keep records the way they should be. Again, permits and licensing, planning and development. There's another area, with the exception of the building department. Our planning and development life cycle group really doesn't have any software other than some self-created software to manage that life cycle of business. So we're hoping to address that entire, call it segment of the, or business unit of the county. There again, workflow management. And basically this is where, this is for citizens, but it's also for employees as well. And the last two there, workflow management and citizen access, go together. But it's basically a software, it's often called in the private sector, it's called CRM, or customer relationship management. And it's basically a central portal database where citizens can input requests, or staff can input requests, from everything from a pothole to basically any question or concern or problem or I need you to do this event that happens goes into this system, and then it actually routes that information correctly to the correct department, correct person in the department, make sure that it's followed up on, and make sure that the citizens are getting a response in a timely manner. And it provides a high level of reporting as well, so that, you know, when you have an issue of a citizen not getting the help that they were supposed to get on time, we have a way to go back and be able to track it and find out where it broke down, and allows us to address those things. So that's central to what we're aiming to do. Again, the other two parts of the software are all public safety. It's a records management system for the police department, basically increasing their capability, including a true mobile environment to do everything from e-citations, accident reports, incident reports, GPS tracking, and many, many, many other activities. Again, 911 CAD system. The system they have in place today is about 15 years old. And again, with the upgrades that are going on with the 911 system, this new software will integrate easily with the new capabilities, specifically with mobile applications, being able to actually dispatch online in the police cars, so that officers get real-time, accurate information, reduce the radio traffic that they have to use, gets them where they need to go faster, gives them directions, tied in with GIS, GPS, and as actually the next version of the 911 system will allow for GPS tracking on mobile phones when 911 is dialed. Right now we can triangulate and get the best or closest tower that they've dialed, but the new system, of course, will allow for basically to be able to pinpoint within just a matter of feet of where that 911 call came from. Extremely valuable. And again, increased reporting capabilities, public information requests, et cetera, will be handled there as well. A little bit about change. Nobody loves to go through change, but we think that communication is key. That's why I'm here today. This is maybe not the most exciting topic in the world to everyone, but we certainly wanted to, we appreciate the opportunity to give you at least a high-level overview of where we're at. I think it's important for the citizens to have the opportunity to understand, you know, what it is we're doing and why we're about to spend some money doing it. Again, their buy-in and cooperation from all the stakeholders are essential, and that really begins with you, with the citizens, of course, all the departments. And I think if you take a poll of all the departments, the department heads, and the employees throughout the county, they're ready. They're ready to change. They are excited about getting away from what we call the green screen. But I haven't heard any negative remarks in terms of why we're doing this, but more of why aren't we doing it faster? But certainly you, county management, all the employees. We're going to be seeking feedback, making some modifications to the plan as needed. Certainly, hopefully, adoption of the plan. And you'll see the set schedule that we have. And I don't know that this needs to be a formal adoption, but certainly wanted to address you today and get your buy-in, hopefully, or your feedback as well. But all departments are going to be required to participate in this business process review, and we're going to be asking each and every department throughout the county to identify at least two people on staff that have decision-making authority to make decisions about how they do their business. Because there are many cases when the new software may actually help drive them to change the way they do business. They may have to be reassigning duties as business processes changes. And certainly, they need to be able to communicate back with their department on these changes and how everyone within the department is going to be affected by them. It is a big change, and there are many duties that may just go away altogether. There are some that are going to change significantly. And so I think everybody's ready to get away from the green screen, but when they really get into it and they find out, oh, my job, you mean what I do on a daily basis is changing, we may get a little kickback. But that's when having your support in this will certainly come a long ways, so that everyone knows that this is a decision that's been made for the entire county and for the good of the county. And certainly implementation of the plan, including installation, data migration, all those other things you see up there. Here is the estimated schedule. This is kind of a sliding schedule, so depending on how fast things happen, RFPs, reviews, schedules to get things before you, et cetera, may affect this. Other things that come up certainly may affect this in the future. But this is what we have right now. Basically, now we begin the communication part of the plan. We've got RFPs out there now for storage. We hope to get the software out here in the next week, and goes all the way through installation, implementation, and we expect to actually have a turnkey. Basically, lights are on, AS400s are decommissioned by January of 2014. We expect for the new system to completely come live about mid-year, around the June-July split at the new budget year, around July of 2013, with 6 months operating in a with dual systems to make sure that we're not missing anything and we don't lose any relevant data. And this is the page that I think probably more pertinent to you than anything. But overall, the expenses of this entire project, and that's everything from the hardware. And let me say this about hardware and the software, is that we are on about a 5-year life cycle with hardware. And that's servers, and that's the back-end stuff. This is money that we have typically have budgeted as a capital item that has to be upgraded every so often, or else the maintenance exceeds the cost of buying something new. And so part of this money would be devoted to that anyway. We're using more and more storage, and so those additional costs are included in this as well. But we're hoping to stick with that 5-year life cycle for the hardware and a 10-year life cycle for the software, where about once every 10 years we need to take a look at the software and our business processes and make sure that we're still on track for where we want to be and make sure the conditions haven't changed too much. The budget calls for about $1.3 million in infrastructure improvements. That's for the servers, the storage, the network, and the phone system, much of which is already underway, except for the storage piece. We have $2 million set aside for the software, and that's a round number, but that's based on some quotes and some calling around other counties to find out, what their investment was like, similar to our size. And we think we're pretty well on track with that. Maintenance is about $200,000 a year for the first 5 year, which all that boils down to, over a 5-year period, about $512 per employee per year. So that's the investment, that's the tool that we're giving to the employees so that they can operate in a more efficient manner. And savings, current AS400 infrastructure costs about $500,000 a year. The savings from improved efficiency would equal about $500,000 a year based on the study that we had commissioned, which is an estimate for all departments, and that was just for 5 departments. Now, those were 5 of the big departments, or data intensive departments for sure. But we looked at finance and purchasing and HR and the tax assessor's office. We think 2.5 is probably a very conservative number, but we're going to stick with that just because it makes sense to. If we come in, if we save more than we say we are, I don't think anybody's going to complain. The savings less cost for the first 5 years, about $15 million. So we're basically looking at a net gain for the county over 5 years of about $11.5 million by implementing this plan. Basically, just a couple of action items. We ask that you support it, that you get on board, understand that the executive level leadership in this project is key, because it is going to change a lot of the way we do business today. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, comments.
You know, it's looking back to 1999, I'm sure we felt like we were cutting edge. In 12 years later, we see how the technology has changed, and I'm sure 12 years in the future, they'll be looking back and sort of rolling their eyes at the technology we're using today, or Mr. Holder will be here to give them a history lesson on how that came about. When you're talking about the training program for our employees, how are you going to go about that? Because that sounds to me like a pretty intensive undertaking.
It is. Typically, we'll begin with whatever company wins the bid for the software. Training is a line item and will be a reviewed line item when we do those RFPs. And it's certainly one of the most important parts of implementing something new and change management. And it's going to be led by the vendor who wins the bid. But in our department, we actually have an employee whose title is information technology trainer, and that way, when the vendor completes their duties and everything's signed off on, we will have an in-house person that has been trained to be able to train and continue that training once the vendor has moved on from the project.
And as you're talking about savings, your return on investment, explain how you arrived at those numbers.
Sure. Just going back to the slide here, $500,000 a year is what the AS400 infrastructure is costing us. That would go away, and so that's looking at what's that, $2.5 million. There, the savings and the efficiency improvements, and that is basically all of the things that we're doing today that either don't need to be done, or we're doing the same work twice or 3 times, and sometimes it's a lot more than that. But it's actually being able to better use the resources that we have, either to complete tasks that aren't being done today, and thereby providing greater value to the county. Or it's potentially not needing that work to be done. I expect, though, in the next 3 years, as we implement this system, I dare say that we're getting done, that the county in general is getting done every single thing that it would like to do. And so, as business processes change and as people's jobs change, as some business functions go away that don't need to be going on, that those resources can be better used to accomplish other tasks. And so there's another $2.5 million a year. And then Excuse me. And that's just from that's the 500,000 that we looked at just from the 5 departments. Extrapolate that out to all the departments. We have 71, I believe it's 71 or 70 now, individual departments within the county, and those are 71 budgeted departments in the county. Now, some of those are, the police department is broken down into several financial budgeted departments that operate independently, at least from a financial perspective. But we looked at 5 out of the 70. And so that $2.5 million over 5 years, along with the cost savings, basically equals $15 million. You take away the expenses of the project, which is the $3.5 million, and it leaves you with a net gain of $11.5 million.
So with these efficiencies in place, of course, the county will continue to grow in population and the demands for services will continue to increase. So in all likelihood, we can expect that as we move forward in the future, that we will not have to hire additional employees to offer these services.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or as we change the business processes, I think we're going to, come across additional tasks that need to be done that haven't ever been done before. And so we're going to be adding functionality to the system that the county's never had before. The citizen relationship management system, that workflow management system I talked about. That's one of those areas where citizens can come in and basically enter a complaint and have that complaint tracked throughout the entire system. That's something that we're going to have to address with some manpower. And so as we shift the way that we do business, we'll be able to provide more services to the county and to the citizens using the current resources instead of having to go and add to it.
Does any board member have a question or comment?
I have just a quick comment, and Clark, what you just said about the tracking, and this will be a quick history lesson too, by the way. I know many of you here remember when Leon Farrer, who is no longer with us, he's passed away, he used to come in, and one of his big complaints was tracking complaints that he had either filed with the county manager or with various departments, that he couldn't get an answer as to where the complaint stopped, didn't go through. And if you go back and review tapes from some of our first broadcasts, you will see where he made those complaints. And I would say if he heard this, he will be smiling in the fact that this will be addressed. And I think that's very important, that citizens are allowed to know where their complaint is and what level of it's being addressed. So I just couldn't help but think about it.
Sure.
Many of you, I hope you remember him, don't you? Because we heard it quite often, and that was one of the big complaints, was we did not have a tracking mechanism in place to know what level his complaint had reached. So
it's an important management tool also, because it provides the folks in management and employees in general to find out where the system breaks down and how to fix it.
Anyone else? Mr. Bowman?
Are there funds in place in these departments to put this plan in motion?
The funds are allocated in the current budget under capital items, and as a part of our normal 5-year upgrade, expenses will be supplanting current maintenance fees and that sort of thing that are for the AS400s and moving those over into the new system as well.
Well, it seems that, and it's true. I mean, there's no getting around that the computer companies and the software manufacturers continually change, and they do that for a reason. I mean, they, obviously they want new software and they want to quit servicing the old software so they can sell you the new software.
Well, and as laws change also, our system has to reflect those laws. Accounting systems, accounting principles have changed significantly in the last several years, and so our software needs to be able to address all of those changes as well. There's a lot of legal requirements that if you don't upgrade the software, that you're not being able to address those legal requirements as well.
And also just, this is more in line of a question than a comment, but aren't we kind of at this point stuck with a particular vendor on these issues, whereas in the next cycle that we will have multiple vendors? Is that?
We're looking
I don't
at,
mean multiple in hundreds, but I mean we'll have more than one.
we certainly may have more than one vendor. One of the things that we are being very specific about in addressing the software needs is making sure that it has somewhat of an open architecture, so that we can get into it and it's not as closed and we're not locked into a very limited resource when it comes to helping service that. And the change in the technology is certainly going to, there's a lot more folks out there that can work on it than what we're
That's
currently stuck
important,
with. It is.
Clark, that we don't get tied into where we have to use that one person, and then we're at their mercy of whatever they want to do
Absolutely.
or charge or change for that matter.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Anyone else? Thank you for the update.
Appreciate y'all.
That was a very good update, by the way, Clark. Thank you.
Did anyone sign up for public comment? Mr. County Manager, anything for public session? No, ma'am. Ms. County Attorney?
No, ma'am.
The upcoming meetings and events: tomorrow, October 4th at 9 a.m., we have a regular meeting. Monday, October 17th at 9 a.m., and Tuesday, October 18th at 6:30 p.m. Both of these are regular board meetings. If there's no further business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Holder, second by Mr. Bowman. All in favor? Motion carries 3-0. We stand adjourned.